Not my woman, no.
And I would never, ever, ever use a lie. Ain't now one of them niggas stepped up and said they hit this. Use a goddamn lie. What you saying, Jonathan?
I'm saying I need you to be a mother, not a networker, not a baddie, not a squawker, not a motherfucker.
I'm not about to let nobody in no club jump on my...
This wasn't a clapback. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't even a bad day on the internet. This was pressure finally snapping in public. Blueface's mom didn't just face criticism. She faced a full-blown fan revolt, and the meltdown that followed had people staring at their screens like, oh, this is getting ugly. Because when the internet turns on you, it doesn't whisper it piles on, it screenshots. It rewinds your past and plays it back in HD with subtitles you never asked for. And this time, fans weren't dragging for fun, they were calling out patterns, long-standing behavior, old comments that suddenly didn't age well at all. The breakdown didn't look strategic. It didn't look controlled. It looked like someone realizing, in real time, that the narrative had slipped out of their hands. The jokes stopped. The defenses collapsed. And what replaced them was something way more uncomfortable. Public accountability. This wasn't about one post. This wasn't about one comment. This was about yours catching up all at once. And when the pressure finally exploded, it didn't just expose emotions. It exposed cracks that fans had been side-eyeing for a long time. This didn't come out of nowhere, no matter how much people want to pretend it did. The meltdown was loud, emotional, and messy, but the fuse had been burning for a long time. Blueface's mom didn't wake up one day and randomly find herself under fire. This was pressure stacking up, brick by brick, until the internet finally pushed back hard. For years, fans watched her presence online grow louder, bolder, and more opinionated. She wasn't just a background parent staying out of the spotlight. She became part of the narrative, part commentator, part defender, part instigator. And the more she spoke, the more people started noticing patterns they couldn't ignore anymore. At first, it was subtle. Side comments here, a tone there, little moments that made people tilt their heads and say, wait, did she really mean that? Fans brushed it off. The same way they always do when behavior is inconvenient to question. People excused it as passion, as a mother being protective, as someone caught in the chaos of fame secondhand. But the internet never forgets. It just waits. Old clips resurfaced. Past statements got replayed without the benefit of context or sympathy. Things that once flew under the radar suddenly looked different when stacked together. What used to feel like isolated remarks began to resemble a pattern, and patterns make people uncomfortable. The turning point wasn't dramatic at first. It was quiet, a shift in comment sections. Fewer defenders, more questions. Fans started calling out what they saw as controlling behavior, public criticism, and moments where boundaries seemed non-existent. And instead of the usual applause, her posts started collecting pushback. That's when the tension showed, because criticism is easy to brush off when it's scattered. It's harder when it becomes consistent, when the same concerns keep popping up from different corners of the internet, when strangers who don't know each other start saying the same thing independently. That's when it stops feeling like hate and starts feeling like a message. The pressure built. Fast, screenshots circulated. Threads formed. People began breaking down her behavior the way they usually break down celebrity scandals. Only this time, the target wasn't the artist, it was the parent, and that flipped the dynamic completely. Fans weren't just critiquing posts anymore. They were questioning influence, asking whether certain actions were helping or hurting, wondering aloud if lines were being crossed behind the scenes the same way they were being crossed online. And once those questions went public, there was no stuffing them back in the box. Her response didn't calm things down. Instead of softening the narrative, emotions poured out. Defensiveness crept in. The tone shifted from confident to overwhelmed. And the more she reacted, the more fans felt like they were watching someone unravel under the weight of public opinion. That's when people realized this wasn't a planned moment. This wasn't a strategic clapback crafted for engagement. This looked like someone genuinely struggling to regain control of a narrative that had slipped away. The composure cracked, the frustration showed. And once that vulnerability hit the timeline, it was over. The internet smelled blood in the water. But this wasn't a pylon driven by jokes alone. There was an edge to it. A seriousness that made the whole situation feel heavier than typical. Online drama, people weren't just dragging, they were dissecting, analyzing, recounting moments they'd kept quiet about before. Some fans admitted they'd felt uncomfortable for a long time but didn't want to say anything. Others said they ignored the signs because calling out a parent felt off limits. That unspoken rule shattered overnight, and when it shattered, everything rushed out. The meltdown itself became the focal point. Videos, posts, and emotional reactions spread fast, each one adding fuel to the fire. Critics pointed to it as proof that the pressure had finally reached a breaking point. Supporters argued she was being unfairly targeted. The divide widened by the hour. What made it worse was the timing, with everything already swirling around Blueface publicly. Fans felt like this was adding chaos instead of stability. That perception, fair or not, stuck quickly. Once the internet decides someone is part of the problem instead of the solution, the narrative hardens fast, and that's exactly what happened here. By the end of the day, this wasn't about one meltdown anymore. It was about the role she played in the broader story, about whether influence was being used responsibly, about whether certain behaviors had crossed from protective into problematic. The pressure didn't just explode. It redirected. Instead of focusing on the usual chaos surrounding Blueface, fans turned their attention to the people closest to him, the ones shaping the environment behind the scenes, the ones whose voices carry weight whether they mean them to or not. And once that spotlight shifted, it burned hotter than expected. The scariest part wasn't the backlash itself. It was how fast public opinion changed. One moment, she was being defended as a misunderstood parent. The next, she was being scrutinized like a reality show villain who overstayed her welcome. That kind of flip doesn't happen without warning signs, and now that the floodgates were open, there was no telling how far this conversation would go. Because once fans feel empowered to call out behavior they've tolerated for years, they don't stop at the surface. Once the backlash reached critical mass, the internet went into full investigation mode. This was no longer a few comments here and there. This was a coordinated wave of scrutiny, and it moved fast. Threads multiplied. Screenshots spread like wildfire. Every past moment got dragged back into the light, dusted off, and re-examined, with a brand new level of suspicion. At first, the reaction leaned sarcastic. Memes started flying, because the internet always laughs before it thinks. People joked that this meltdown made other celebrity family drama look like wholesome holiday movies. Some said it felt like watching a reality show where the parent suddenly becomes the main antagonist. Others joked that even the loudest talk show arguments had more structure than what was unfolding online. But the humor didn't hold. Very quickly, the jokes turned sharp. The tone hardened. Fans stopped laughing and started listing receipts. Long captions broke down patterns. Clips were stitched together to show consistency instead of coincidence. And once the narrative shifted from "this is funny" to "this is a problem," the pressure doubled. Influencers and commentary pages jumped in cautiously at first. Nobody wanted to be the first to say it out loud. But once a few bigger voices called the behavior out directly, the floodgates opened. Suddenly, it wasn't taboo anymore. It wasn't disrespectful. It was framed as accountability. That framing changed everything. Supporters tried to push back, saying the criticism had gone too far, that people were forgetting this was a mother reacting emotionally. But even those defenses started sounding tired, because the pushback wasn't about one emotional moment anymore. It was about repetition, about consistency, about influence being exercised publicly without filters or boundaries. And the internet doesn't forgive repetition. As the outrage grew, the comparisons got wilder. People said this drama was starting to overshadow the artist himself, that the side characters had hijacked the storyline. that the chaos surrounding him now felt generational instead of situational. The exaggerations were ruthless, but they landed because emotionally, the audience felt overwhelmed. Then came the celebrity-adjacent reactions. No direct callouts. No names dropped, just subtle signs, likes on shady posts, comments under unrelated videos that felt a little too perfectly timed. Vague quotes about letting adults make their own choices and knowing when to step back. The internet decoded every move like it was a mystery novel. Fan bases split deeper. One side argued this was a pylon fueled by boredom and outrage culture. The other side said this was long overdue and that silence had enabled behavior for too long. Comment sections became battlegrounds, with people arguing about respect, accountability, and whether family should ever be public at all. But here's where it escalated. People started asking whether this behavior affected more than just optics. Whether constant public commentary created pressure behind the scenes, whether lines between support and control had blurred over time. These weren't accusations, they were questions. And questions are harder to shut down than insults. That's when panic really set in, because once the conversation moves from what was said to what impact it has, the stakes skyrocket. This wasn't about tone anymore, it was about influence, access, and power dynamics that fans suddenly felt comfortable discussing out loud. Even platforms seemed to notice. Certain posts disappeared, comment sections were restricted, content slowed down. No announcements, no explanations, just subtle changes that told everyone this situation was being watched closely. The meltdown had officially outgrown the moment. It became a case study in how fast public favor can flip when the audience feels uncomfortable instead of entertained. When the narrative shifts from messy to harmful, the rules change, sympathy evaporates, patience runs out. And through all of this, the pressure on her intensified. Every response was scrutinized, every word parsed, silence was criticized, speaking up was criticized harder. There was no safe move anymore. The internet had decided this wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a reckoning. People who had once ignored the drama now weighed in, saying this felt different, heavier, less like gossip and more like something unresolved finally coming to the surface. The kind of situation that doesn't blow over in a weekend. By the end of this phase, one thing was painfully clear. The meltdown had shifted the power dynamic. Fans no longer felt like passive observers. They felt entitled to demand change, to demand accountability, to demand boundaries. And once an audience feels that empowered, there's no going back. The fallout didn't announce itself with sirens or statements. It crept in quietly, the way real consequences usually do. One day the timeline was led with reactions, and the next it felt oddly restrained. Posts slowed, replies became selective. The energy shifted from defiant to defensive, and that change told everyone exactly how hard the pressure had landed. Fans noticed the difference immediately. Not just what was said, but what wasn't. The absence of the usual confidence, the hesitation in tone, the careful wording that felt less like expression and more like survival. When someone who's been outspoken suddenly chooses every word, like it might detonate, the internet senses fear. And fear doesn't inspire sympathy, it invites scrutiny. Public perception began to harden. This wasn't a temporary wave of criticism anymore. It was a reevaluation. Supporters who once rushed to defend every post stopped arguing, not because they agreed with the backlash, but because they were tired. Exhaustion replaced loyalty, and exhaustion is lethal in the attention economy. When the audience stops caring enough to fight, the narrative collapses on its own. What really stung was how quickly the storyline flipped. The image of a protective parent got replaced with a far less flattering label, a public liability. Whether that label was fair didn't matter. Once it sticks, it spreads. Every past moment gets reinterpreted through that lens. Every future action gets judged twice as harshly. Behind the scenes, the consequences likely looked even colder. No public announcements, no dramatic distancing, just fewer mentions, fewer collaborations. fewer friendly signals from people who once showed support. That's how reputations actually take hits quietly, efficiently, without the courtesy of closure. Doors don't slam, they simply stop opening. The relationship dynamics took a hit too. Fans began speculating about boundaries, influence, and whether lines had been blurred beyond repair. The idea that family involvement was helpful started to feel questionable. When public support turns into public pressure, it stops being support at all. Attempts to smooth things over didn't land the way they might have before. Apologies without accountability sounded hollow. Silence without clarity felt evasive. The audience had moved past surface-level explanations. They wanted acknowledgement of patterns, not excuses for moments, and that's where things got uncomfortable. Because acknowledging patterns means admitting consistency. It means accepting that this wasn't a one-off mistake. It was behavior, repeated often enough for people to recognize it. And once that recognition sets in, there's no reboot button. The story doesn't reset, it evolves. The internet didn't forget. It archived. This meltdown became a reference point, a moment people would bring up later when similar drama surfaced. This reminds me of that situation. This feels like the same pattern. Once your name becomes shorthand for controversy, everything you do gets filtered through suspicion. Some fans disengaged quietly. No dramatic announcements, no unfollows celebrated in comment sections, just absence. Views dipped, engagement cooled. And disengagement is the most brutal response of all because it starves chaos instead of feeding it. Others stayed, but with conditions. They wanted change, boundaries. Proof that this wasn't just another cycle resetting itself. And once those expectations are placed publicly, they don't disappear easily. The pressure shifted from explosive to constant, not loud enough to trend, but heavy enough to linger. Every move now carried weight. Every comment risked reigniting the conversation. The margin for error shrank to almost nothing. What made this moment different from past controversies was the clarity it forced. Fans weren't confused anymore. They weren't debating intent or context. They had decided how this made them feel. And feelings drive narratives far more than facts ever will. This wasn't about punishment, it was about trust. And once trust cracks publicly, repairing it takes more than time. It takes change that people can see, not just statements they can scroll past. As the dust settled, one thing became painfully clear. The meltdown didn't just expose emotions. It exposed fractures that had been forming for years. And fractures don't disappear when the noise dies down, they widen. The story didn't end here. It transformed. From viral moment to cautionary tale, from background drama to central conflict, from online noise to lasting reputation shift. And the question hanging over everything wasn't whether the backlash went too far, it was whether this moment would actually change anything. Because in the world of celebrity chaos, silence doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it just means the next chapter is being written off camera. All right. If you're still here, don't act surprised. You knew this wasn't going to end quietly. This wasn't just a meltdown. This was pressure boiling over after years of side eyes, screenshots, and unspoken questions finally collided in public. And if you felt even a little uncomfortable watching it unfold, congratulations, that means you were actually paying attention. Now do me a favor. First, smash that like button like it's been talking crazy behind your back and just got caught on camera. Likes tell the algorithm you want the real breakdowns, not the soft focus PR edits or the nothing to see here fairy tales. Second, drop a comment immediately. I don't want polite. I don't want vague. I want your honest take. Did fans go too far? Was this accountability overdue? Or was this pressure building for years and finally snapping exactly the way everyone pretends it won't? Say it with your chest. The comment section is where the truth actually fights back. And third, subscribe. Not because I'm begging, because let's be real, these scandals don't take days off. They reload if you want the stories before they get cleaned up, rebranded, and blamed on the internet being messy. You already know where to be. This channel doesn't whisper, we don't protect narratives. And we definitely don't ignore patterns just because they're uncomfortable. Drama doesn't disappear, it evolves. Receipts resurface, pressure builds. And sooner or later, somebody cracks dots, so turn on notifications. Stay locked in and keep your eyes open, because if you think this was the breaking point, just wait until the next chapter drops. This is Fame Flaws, where celebrity pressure gets exposed, reputations get tested, and nothing stays buried for long.